Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to learn how a plane flies. This is the principles of flight. We're going to use this little cub here. And interestingly enough, we are at RAF Linton-on-Ouse. Now this is actually where I learnt to fly in real life, and this is where I first went solo. Unfortunately, was not using the Tucanos because this was where the RAF Central Flying School had the high-speed propellers, which was sort of on your transition to jets. Rather, I was doing the Grob Tutors, which is what we had in the Air Cadets. Coming up, actually, just we've got the sat photo here. So we've got the airbase, the airfield here. But here you see the sat photo of the actual airbase itself. And seeing some of this brings back a lot of memories. It's from half a lifetime ago. Unfortunately, I think the base has since been sold off. So it's just a case of waiting for xPlane to basically delete the airfield out of its database, which will be unfortunate as well. But until that happens, for now, it's the principles of flight. So welcome to the video. The first thing that we learned, and I think this is really an easy sort of thing to show, is especially on this plane here, the Paper Cub, the shape of the wing. You know, they sometimes refer to this as the aerofoil. What I want you to just really notice is that at the front is a slightly blunter edge, and on the trailing edge or the back is a sharper edge. So front is blunt or more curved, more smooth. Trailing edge, or another word for the front is the leading edge, by the way, and the trailing edge or the back is sharp. Now, some people may think, well, hang on, that seems a bit back to front. Surely you'd want the sharp edge at the front to help cut through the air, and if anything, a blunt edge at the back. Now that would really sort of make sense if all it was having to do was cut through the air. But the real secret about the wing or the aerofoil, I'll probably use those terms interchangeably, is notice here along the bottom of the wing is flat. Yeah, it's more or less a straight line. But if we look at the top of the wing, and I realize it's kind of hard for me to sort of move my camera pretty gently, but I want you to notice there, perhaps that's a better view, it's quite curved. In fact, it's almost a teardrop shape. So you could argue that the wing is, at least on the top side of it, is like a teardrop. Along the bottom, there is a bit of a curve just at the very front, but then it's flat all the way until the end. That's crucial to understand. Now you may say, why does that matter? Why should it matter? Well, here's why. I'm going to show you a video. This video is not mine, but it demonstrates perfectly what we're getting at. And this literally was the first thing that I learned. And when I went to teach the principles of flight, it was the first thing that I would show the class. And if you want to try this at home or wherever you are, I encourage you to do this. You only need a sheet of paper, so here we go. This is not my video, by the way. This particular video on YouTube is by Science Made Easy, but it demonstrates the point perfectly. The guy is going to blow across the top of the paper. Watch what happens.
And then blow across that sharply. So notice I'm blowing across the top, not underneath, but over the top. And as I blow...
Right, so what you understand there is, as he blows across the top of the piece of paper, it lifts up. And you may say, well, what's that got to do with anything? But you really got to understand what's going on here. Because the air underneath the piece of paper is basically not moving, but the air above the piece of paper is moving, the faster that difference is between the non-moving air, or let's say slower moving air, versus the faster moving air, the more the lift, okay? And so don't think, oh, it's somehow static electricity, or he's somehow twizzling it with his fingers, or there's some hidden fan somewhere. There isn't. And if you want to prove that for yourself, just grab a piece of paper of this sort of size and conduct the test yourself. Hold it right up against your mouth, but blow only over the top of the sheet of paper. And so there is a rule, and I've forgotten the name. It's some, you know, science guy from a couple of centuries ago. But the point of it is, we'll come back to xPlane here. The point of it is, fast moving air is treated as a fluid. And if we get faster moving air over the top of the wing versus underneath the wing, then the faster moving air over the top creates a lift force. Now, I'm going to use some words that may not be exactly correct, but hopefully it will get everybody on the same page. I'm going to use the word lower pressure because the air's moving faster over the top. As we've seen, there's like a lower pressure that creates a sucking force. Okay, now the sucking force, because the lower pressure is above the wing, is going to lift the wing or pick the wing up. The higher pressure underneath the wing is, because it's higher, you know, if you've got lower pressure on one side, higher pressure on the other, it naturally wants to equalize out. That's going to provide a pushing force. In this case, we're going to call that force the lift. Now you may say, well, what causes the air then? Because clearly there's no guy stood there blowing over the top of the wing. What causes the air to go faster over the top of the wing versus underneath the wing? And this is where the importance of the shape of the wing comes into place. If you take a look here, if you imagine the air's coming along the front, and I'm just going to sort of draw it vaguely with my mouse pointer here. It's going to hit the wing right about here, and this is where the wing splits off, yeah? So any air that is above where my mouse is here is going to go over the top of the wing. Any airflow that's beneath where my mouse is here is going to be directed underneath. It's right around there, give or take sort of a millimeter or two. But which has the shortest journey to go? And remember, the airflow, once it completes, is at the trailing edge of the wing, which is here where my mouse is on the right hand side. And it won't take many of you too long to figure out, well, if over the top it's got to follow all the way around this curve, but under the bottom it's aside from this little bit at the front here, it's a direct straight line. Clearly the underside is the shorter distance, and you'd be correct, the shorter distance. So if the same amount of air is stretched over a longer distance, what do we know about speed and distance and time? They're all related, okay? So if the same amount of air comes at the front, clearly because the plane's flying through the same air, the same amount of air leaves at the back because it has to, unless somehow the plane's magically making it disappear. Therefore, for the same amount of air to be split across this wing, by definition, the air going over the top of the wing has slightly further to travel. The only way it can pull that off versus the air that's got the shorter distance underneath is by traveling faster. It travels faster, it stretches out a bit further because it's got a longer distance, and as we've seen with the piece of paper, the faster the air flows, and we just know from common sense, the lower the air pressure that it is, the more of a lifting force is created. And what's interesting about this effect is it's related to the square of the speed of the aircraft. Now, don't freak out about what that means. All that means is if the plane doubles in speed, the amount of lift generated is times 4. And so if the plane's going, let's just say 50 knots, and then it doubles to 100 knots, even though it's only doubled in speed, the amount of lift that the exact same wing generates increases by 4. And that's important to remember, because that's why when you take a look at different sizes of planes and you say, well, hang on a minute, how come a Cessna sort of stalls, let's say 60 knots, but then an aircraft like a 737, which we could argue is, let's just say 10 times as big, how come that doesn't need to fly 10 times as fast before it stalls? Well, the answer is because of this rule that we've just said. You double the speed, you get 4 times the amount of lift. Clearly the larger planes have bigger wings as well, but you know, there is that. And that's why as well, if you take the same plane that is capable of doubling its weight using fuel and cargo, you'll notice you don't need double the speed for takeoff or landing. It is a significantly higher speed, but it might be something like, well, it's 180 knots instead of 130, but it's certainly not going to be 130 versus 260 knots. And so with that said, that is how the aircraft or the wing generates the lift. It's why they don't work when it's very slow, and that's known as a stall. So a stall is, it's hard for me to move the camera very slowly here, but the stall is For the airflow to flow around the wing and generate the lift, it's literally known as the Laminar airflow, which is the name that the developers of xPlane have, they've taken that on, right? Laminar Research is their name. The air has to flow around the wing smoothly to generate the lift. Now, if the pilot tries to fly slower and slower, and we'll take a look at this in a minute, he has to pull back more and more on the stick. The plane points more and more into the sky, but at some point, he's flying so slow, or her is flying so slow that the wing is no longer able to keep that smooth airflow around it. The air can't stay stuck to it anymore, and it basically starts tumbling away. And you'll see it if you've ever seen like it in a wind tunnel or whatever. You'll see this violent wing motion with the smoke. If you're inside, those of you that have, whether you've done flying or just done it for fun or whatever, you'll know everything starts to shake. And that shake is, it begins right at the start of the stall, and it gets worse and worse until you do something to rectify it. And at that point, the wing stops working and you begin falling out the sky. Not much different than a brick. I mean, the wing is still working to a little extent, providing you've got a little bit of speed, but very, very little. And in some cases, it can work against you because one wing might be creating slightly more lift than the other wing, and then you risk entering a spin and all the rest of it. All right, so that's that. I'm going to now go ahead, get this aircraft started up. Rather than embarrassing, it's been so long since I've flown one of these. I'll tell you what, I'll leave it running. You can have a good laugh at me. So mags on. I don't think we've got the power on. Fuel is left on anyway, which is great. It sounds like there's a bit of rain here at Linton-on-Ouse. I remember some people used to nickname it Linton-on-the-Booze. That was not my time. So taxi light, beacon, nav, landing lights, go on then. Fuel looks like we've got enough, and we have got some lighting on in the cockpit. Let's go ahead, put the mixture in. Just quick check on the throttle, that's good. Alright, so here we go then. So prime, I'm just going to give it one go and hold the start. I'm going to squeeze the brakes, here we go. Sounds like we've got a good one. Alright, I'm just going to set the altimeter to QFE, which is just 0 on the base. And we're going to make a start. Now, one of the things that reasons I chose xPlane to demonstrate this is we're able to see the forces. And so if I press view, it's Control M or Control Mic, what I'm looking for. Yeah, are these particular element forces. And so right now we're stood still. You can see the weight of the aircraft is basically completely offset by the wheels. And you can see the two main wheels. The forces are signified by these green lines. Basically, green is good, red is bad overall. They view green as lift and acceleration and bad as weight or drag. So what I'm going to do is let go of the brakes. I'm just going to add a little bit of power. You can see here we're getting some forward acceleration force from the prop there. The more power I put on, the more force that gives. Now, one thing to know, I'll just stop here, is if we see the propeller spinning in this particular direction. So as we're viewing the propeller from our view here, I'm just going to turn that down a sec. It's rotating in an anti-clockwise rotation. Now, what's really important to understand about this, absolutely crucial, is that this causes the airflow as it pushes it back over the plane also to ever so slightly have this anti-clockwise rotation as we view it from the front. And what happens is, as it continues to spiral around the aircraft in the motion that I'm trying to show you with my mouse, at some point it's going to bang into the side of this rudder here. And so again, if we view it now this way, it's in a clockwise direction because we've changed the direction of the camera. The airflow is round the right hand side of the aircraft, underneath, up the left, and round it goes, and then into the rudder here. Bang. And what that happens when that airflow hits that rudder on the left side, it pushes it to the right, And as the rudder twists over to the right-hand side, you can see that would cause the nose of the aircraft to twist to the left. That would be called like a yawing motion, yeah? So if you imagine a pin stuck in the ground more or less where those wheels are, the force hits the rudder here, the front of the aircraft left. And so that's why sometimes when you're inside the plane, providing you've got the realism on, I'm just going to let go of the rudders here. We'll see if we can cause it to happen. Of course, there may be a bit of wind. I have got real weather on. So let's just go for it. Full power. 3, 2, 1. There you go. Look at that twisting motion there to the left. So, and notice as soon as I let go of the power, it sort of stopped the desire to twist. And I'm not. Can we get that view from the outside? Let's have a look. Yeah, there we see it. Can we pause? Not as easy as I thought, but there were just there. There we see, look, as I add power, we're getting this force here from the right-hand side. And again, that's, you know, these lines here are the direction that the force is taking. Okay, another thing I want to note is as we accelerate, you're going to start and see these red arrows as we go faster and faster backwards. That symbolizes the drag. So I'm going to just try, I'm going to use my rudder now. I'm just going to try keep it on the runway, but while having a sideways view. Somebody left quite a well, I thought it was quite funny, a comment. But they were basically saying that I was disrespecting my subscribers by taking off on the A350 and not keeping it on the runway and then laughing at myself. I thought it was hilarious. I thought, you know, it was the aircraft rudder response slow. We had a bit of a crosswind. I was trying to do a cinematic for the purposes of the video. It skidded off. I laughed at myself. How is that anything to... Anyway, whatever. Right, back to the thing. So you see now, and it's quite hard to see because I realise the lines are quite small, but perhaps if I view it like that, you can see we've got these tiny little red lines behind the green. Actually, quite a lot of green there now above the wing. That is lift being generated by the wing. Now, it's not yet enough to lift the aircraft into the air, but you can see that there's already a lot of lift being generated at this speed, and those red lines to the back just behind, again, they're signifying the drag. The faster you go, the more drag comes, also with the square of the speed. And so as we get faster and faster here, you can see the wings generating more and more lift, and the amount of lift that is, if you want to call it that, being generated by the main wheels is going to reduce accordingly. And there you see there was a bit of a yaw. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So at some point, I'll tell you what, slow down. I don't want to crash the plane. We'll spin it back round, but hopefully that makes sense. And so what we're going to do now is come into the air. There's a couple of things I want to show. The rudder's also a good one. And the aircraft that we used to learn, they didn't have any ability to steer. And so what that meant was, unlike this one here, as I'm pressing the rudder pedals, it's actually turning the tail wheel. What we had was that the wheel was free. The only thing that turned was the rudder. So in order to steer the aircraft, what we had to do was put power on, only stand on one of the brakes, either the left or the right, and then press the rudder like that. And so as the air blew backwards, if I just put the brakes on, it would hit this rudder here and it would basically push the aircraft off to the side, and same there. And again, using differential braking, which all that means is I'm braking on this wheel here or this wheel here. And obviously we wouldn't be trying to skid it around like that. I mean, oh, I've lost the engine. What's happened there? Have I knackered it? Ah, the mixture's gotten pulled out somehow. I think that's why. Right, let's try it again. Right, here we go. So we're on again. Let's add power now. And this time we're going to go into the air. And I will keep these forces on for this video. So again, the forces you see here are being put off the propeller. And so the more power I add, you can see the more it's sucking the plane, if we want to use that along, propelling the aircraft through, again, using the exact right. There is quite a little bit of turbulence here today, so I'm going to have to just get this takeoff over and done with. Dancing across the rudder pedals, which you have to do anyway in a prop, but never more than when there's gusts and that. In fact, that's what really impressed my instructors and why they asked me a couple of years later to come back to become an instructor. There was a crosswind on one of the days I was coming into land, and I'm telling you guys, this was just 95% luck. It was 5% because I had one of the early Microsoft flight sims and I was learning to fly. I was coming in on this crosswind landing with the chief flying instructor there, and just as I flared, I kicked it straight and I nailed the landing. And the thing is, it was the first time I'd done a crosswind landing with a real aircraft. There was no way other than in the flight sim I could have practiced it. The fact that I had it all down with the feeling and the periphery and that, I'm telling you, all of that was luck. The only thing that I had on my side was the knowing that I need to kick this thing straight just before I, that was it. Anyway, that was all I needed, and that was the ticket to, everything else that came from there. Right, so let's come back to the outside. And again, I'm not saying that that was anything special. If anybody with a flight sim and a bit of luck would have achieved that and the same opportunities. So here we are flying, and I'm stood ever so slightly on the rudder just to offset here the propeller. So if I let go of the propeller entirely, depending on the speed of the aircraft and where it's naturally designed. So the aircrafts are naturally designed to cruise at a certain speed and a power setting, and you shouldn't need the rudder. If you try and put more power on, you'll need to rudder slightly one way. If less power, like landing, you may even need a bit of rudder the other way. So what I would like you to do, though, if you're flying, and this is all the time, and not with a helicopter, but with any aircraft in the sim, and I live by this all the time, is treat it as though you are, obviously we have two wings, but just imagine that's all that you've got, two wings for your lift, a left and a right. Do not treat them as one thing with one stall speed and it's either it's stalling or it's not. Treat it as the left wing and the right wing, and here's why. Because when you are right close to the stall speed, you can actually cause one of the wings to stall before the other in what you do. I'm going to try and demonstrate that here. Perhaps a little bit higher would be great. Also notice as I'm pushing and pulling the nose, as I push the nose over, the wing needs to generate less lift. And as I pull back on the stick, the wing needs to generate more lift. That's obvious, right? If we're inside the aircraft, we would call this a G-force. And that is why, if you get really slow, the very worst thing you can do is pull back on the stick, because the wing has to work harder. It's not got any speed, and that's just going to bring the stall on even quicker. So I'm going to try and demonstrate here now. So pulling back on the stick, there we go, there's a stall. Actually both wings going, but you see there we enter a bit of a spin and trying to recover. Oh dear. Wasn't able to do it with the height that I had, which is why you shouldn't really be doing aerobikes that low down. But I hope you saw there the whole thing. I'm surprised actually they even modeled the wing breaking off, which is interesting. All right, let's go to new flight. It's back inside. Where are we? Master 1, 2. Let's see how fast we can do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put the mixture on full. Primer 1 and mags both. Starter. Quick as that. Right. Okay. So let's stand the brake. Normally you'd have to wait for oil temperature. You'd have to do all these checks. And if you didn't, you'd risk losing the engine. I'm not so sure that they've simulated that. You know what, we can find out. So what we're going to learn on this one, and then I think I'm going to slowly come to the end of the video. Oh, we've still got the forces on, because there is a lot to take in on this. Is when you feel the G-forces, as we were saying, whether it's 2 Gs or 3 Gs, obviously 1 G is normal gravity, right? I think we sort of all know that. So 2G, you feel twice as heavy as you really are because, you know, you're pulling back on the stick. And similarly, if you push the nose over, you might be half a G, or if you push it really hard, 0 G. And if you push it really hard, you can even get into negative G. Same if you fly upside down. The same applies for the entire aircraft. It's not just you imagining this feeling. There really is a G. And the wings have to hold that whole weight. So if your aircraft, let's just say, weighs 1,000 kilograms, let's just, with you in it and all the fuel, let's just round numbers. If you're pulling 2G, the wings are no longer supporting 1,000 kilograms, they're supporting 2,000 kilograms. And so while on the one side it's important, like now if you see I've got quite a low speed, so yeah, I can pull up a little bit, and again it's the pulling, it's the changing of the pitch that causes the G. It's not necessarily the climb per se, it's the pulling up into the climb or pulling out of a dive as well, you know. So we're going down now, and if I was just pull very suddenly there, and you can see the left wing starting to go a bit as well, so let's try that one more time. There it goes, one wing before the other. Okay, so let's see if we can recover this time. So I'm getting the speed on. Oh, thank goodness there is a pause button. What I'm going to do here, this is really, really important as well to understand if you get in a stall. Use the height that you've got available. Don't try and recover as quick as possible because you risk entering another stall. Use the height, let your speed build up and just pull up gradually. I mean, if need be, you can go all the way down to you're like an inch off the floor. What you can't do is try and pull back while you're still at 500-600 feet in this case. Enter another stall, worse yet, a stall spin, and then like last time, you've had it. There's no way of recovering. So we're just going to keep going. Gradually pull up, and there we go. Ignore the artificial horizon, we seem to have knackered it. Right, one last thing then, and that is using the rudder and the effect that has. So you're just going to have to, I may just have to pull the nose up a bit. In fact, perhaps I can just trim that. There we go. And so what I'm going to do now, I've completely let go of the stick entirely, and I'm just going to use my rudder pedals. And so this here, if I put a bit more power on to sort of control the speed, and with it the more speed the more lift, we've gone over that. So if I put right rudder on, notice what happens here. The rudder deflects in this direction, so I've pushed the right foot down. We get this force here to the left. That's going to push the tail round to the left, and again, if we imagine this imaginary center sort of around they call it the center of lift and the center of gravity, which is very close to where the main wheels are. It'll be just behind the main wheels so that the plane doesn't tip forward while it's on the ground. What that happens then, the front of the nose yaws to the right. Yeah, the back goes to the left, the front goes to the right. Now, once that motion starts, for around a second or two, no more than that, this wing here is going to be moving forwards faster through the air than this wing here, yeah? Because if we're twisting the plane, if you imagine the plane is like a giant lid for the moment, if we're twisting that lid to the right, clearly this wing here is going to slice through the air faster than this wing here that's going to be coming backwards. Again, relative to the airflow, it might just be 1 or 2 miles an hour or 1 or 2 knots for 1 or 2 seconds. But those 1 or 2 knots difference in airspeed by the other 1 or 2 knots that are slower. So let's say it's 3 or 4 knots in total difference between the left wing and the right wing. You're going to get a lot more lift, even though you think, well, it's only 2 or 3 knots. Yeah, but it's enough to cause the wings, this wing to generate more lift, this wing to generate less lift. Because it's going faster, more lift, it's going to lift upwards. Because this one's generating less lift because it's going slower, it's going to go down. And that is like a secondary effect of using the rudder. And so if we unpause now, I'm going to keep my foot held in. We can expect the aircraft to initially yaw and then roll. There's the yaw. And there we see the roll. Now if I keep the boot held in, it's going to roll further and further. The more I push the boot in, the more it's going to roll. You see, first it twists a bit, then the roll. If I put the opposite one in, twists a bit. See, it's flying sideways a little bit as well. This is known as a skid right now. So the aircraft, if I line the camera up, is probably flying in that direction over there. There we see it. Until it has a chance to catch up with what I'm doing. I'm just going to ease off a bit so we don't enter a spin here. And again, I've completely let go of the stick the whole time. I'm just using the rudder here to steer the aircraft. Now, on larger wings, specifically gliders, I did a lot of gliding as well, advanced gliding. Did a 5-hour solo over Scotland, which was the longest flight I'd ever done by myself. And it was a lot of fun. And because those wings were really big and really flimsy, if you steered with the wings one way, and I know there's a glider in this, but I'm trying to save a bit of time. For a split second, let's see if we can get it to happen. Right, I'm going to pause it there, and this will be the perfect to show. So all that I did right now, I let go of the rudder, I just fully threw the stick over to the right-hand side. So I threw it over to the right, as we would expect, the aircraft is going to roll to the right. Why does it do this? Let's take a look back at our side profile. So the aileron here goes down. Remember what we were saying about the distance over the top of the wing versus the bottom? Well, by putting this aileron down, the airflow that's going over the top of the wing actually has even further to travel because it's got to go to the end here. And then here's even more of a curve, so it's increased the distance. What that means is there's even bigger of a difference between the pressure above the wing and below. Therefore, this wing is going to be encouraged to lift up. This, by the way, is why you see the jets with the flaps all the time. You know, the flaps are basically putting this down on both sides. It makes a bigger curve over the wing. It allows the wing to generate more lift, and, you know, they use that to fly slower. The opposite, however, is happening on this side. If we take a look over here, by raising the aileron, the aileron on this side, the airflow that's going over the top of the wing is actually, the distance is a little shorter, and the airflow underneath the wing actually has a little further to travel now, again, to meet up at the back here of this trailing edge. In other words, more lift on the left, less lift on the right. You know the rest, it's going to cause a tip. And if we zoom out, we can see here with these green lines, the more lift is represented by more green lines or longer green lines on the left. And we can clearly see on the right-hand side, it's a lot less, and thereby the aircraft begins its roll. One other thing to notice, because we're asking this wing to create more lift at this moment in time, and this wing less lift, this wing creates more drag. So if you imagine like a little toy boat just going down a stream, and you were to put your finger where my mouse currently is, the toy boat, or in this case the floating aircraft, or wherever you want to view it, would naturally try to curve around your finger. In other words, even though we're trying to roll to the right or steer to the right, you'd get what's known as adverse yaw, and that's going to try and twist the aircraft or yaw the aircraft to the left. And that's why originally, very, very early days, even the Wright brothers already had it figured out. In order to effectively steer an aircraft, you need to put in a rudder to fix or to account for that adverse yaw to keep it straight. And as we've said, the bigger the wing, the worse the adverse yaw becomes. If you're in a very high-speed jet and you're going like 90% the speed of sound, or you break the sound barrier, there's almost no need, if not no need, for rudder at all, because you're only making the tiniest movements anyway. But at these slow speeds, or with the bigger wings, we make these big movements here, and so it will require the adverse yaw. So I'm just going to keep my stick over. And there, I don't know if you saw it there, just for a split second. Let's go back into the cockpit. So again, you're just going to have to trust me on this, that I'm not using the rudder. But once again, I'm going to put the stick all the way over to the right. I want you to see, aside from the twisting to the right, if we see a slight motion to the left. Ready? 3, 2, 1, now. Yeah, there we see that. If you look at the top of the compass with the field, let's try it one more time. And the opposite happens the other way. So as I steer left, look at the nose go to the right, I steer right. Look at it go to the left. Right, let's level it off. Let's pick something in the distance that makes it quite easy. I don't know. Let's go for there. All right. So this time I'm going to go to the left, so we expect the nose to go to the right. Ready? 3, 2, 1, now. There we go. You see, we was just to the right. We was just to the left of that thing there on the field, a little quarry or something. The nose has gone right, possibly 5, even 10 degrees. And so that's known as the adverse yaw. And again, it's if you want to counteract that, the way to do it is as you roll the stick, push the boot in, and then as you center up the stick, whether you're in the turn or not, you can start easing off on the rudder as well. It's not that if you don't do that, the aircraft will fall out the sky. But it's a much more efficient way of flying, and by efficient mean faster as well. And aerodynamically, the plane flies a lot better within what they would call coordinated flight. And so I think we've been over some of the basics there. And so I don't want this to go on too long because I realize it's pretty intensive, especially if it's the first time you've heard many of these things. So let's see if we can control Mike, turn some of these. What actually other views do we have with regards to... Well, same here again, and I think here we can see a percentage of the angle of attack. So again, as we're asking the wings to do less, we pull back, we ask them to do more. And again, if we run out of speed, and the other way, right? If you pull back, you run out of speed. There you can see, look at that, they're getting close to the stall. I'm just going to put a bit of rudder there to pick that wing up rather than roll it to the right. Just because it's flying slow and we get close to the stall, rather than having to let it stall, what you can actually do is just let go of the nose, push the nose over, and you will not stall, even though you're going really slow. Let's just demonstrate that from the inside. Let's get rid of these forces, all right? So I'll just lower the view a bit so you can see the speed there. We're going to get some height. I've got the power on. Up we go. Now look at the speed. Less than 40 knots. There's going to be a stall there, so I'm going to push the nose over. I kept it there a little bit too long, but see, there was no... The stall didn't develop. Let's do it one more time. I'm just going to reduce the power a little bit so there's a bit less torque. Right, 3, 2, 1 now, pushing the nose down. And again, you push the nose over just like going over the back of a little bridge fast in the car. You feel less G. Well, less G is less weight for the wings to hold. And, they can do it at a lower speed without stalling. And, of course, if you can keep that going like we can, you're never going to enter the stall. And providing you've got height, 3, 2, 1, let's go, push it down. You pick up the speed again, then you can start pulling back on the stick and recovering. And so that's going to be the end of the lesson. And with that, I'm going to land at the airfield. Kind of sad to me that it's no longer an RAF base, and I don't want to get into the politics of all that. And especially because, I had so many good times at this base, man. And I remember walking off base on a weekend with my friends. We would go hang out by the river here. This is the River Ouse. Fun times, right? All right, flaps down. And so, yeah, as perhaps a little bonus here as we're coming in, I'll just pause it there. We'll come to the out... Oh, what? What have I done there? There we go, the flap view. You can see here what the flaps have done. Now, this is flaps full in the Cub, but exactly the same process. Yeah, air coming underneath has got a sort of slightly shorter direct path to the flaps there. Air going over the top. It's got to go all the way around this curve, and then round the longer distance it had anyway, and then continue to follow the curve round here before it finally has chance to beat up. Now, that obviously generates more lift, but you can see sticking a flap like this into the airflow on either side is also going to create more drag, so the plane can't fly as fast. That stands to reason. But yeah, more lift, more drag with the flaps, and the leading edge slats as well. If you ever notice them, whether it's on a prop or on a jet, you'll notice they extend forwards but also slightly down. And again, that's crucial to understand, because what they're really doing is they're making the curve over the top of the wing as big and as long as possible versus underneath where, the air's in this case, because the air ain't going to go all the way around here and then all the way down there. I mean, a little bit of it will. The majority is going to find the path of least resistance, which is going to be, the shortest from point A to point B. Clearly, it can't cut through the metal, so the air is forced to go round on the top. And so with that said and done, yeah, let's unpause and see if we can land here without screwing it up, seeing as we screwed it the first time. Oh, and yes, we did do things that you're not supposed to do, by the way. All sorts of things. don't believe this BS that you hear these pilots with these massive channels where they make out that they're perfect all the time. They've got to obviously say it for their employer and everything. It's not the case. And you get all these do-gooder in the comments whenever time something goes wrong and, oh, I can't believe they didn't do, and you think, yeah, what? And you've never gone a mile an hour over the speed limit or what yourself either. All right, there we go. Yeah, the winds were kind of horrific, and directional control, I think, leaves a little bit to be desired on this particular aircraft. I was using differential braking there. I was still sliding all over, but at least we live to tell the tale. All right, until next time, from me here on the internet, Flight Rules, wherever in the world you may be, take care. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. See you again. Bye-bye.